Everyone is a star child, made of stardust and the infinite potential of the universe. This extraordinary fearless something in each of us clamors for freedom from the bonds of fear, conformity, and an ordinary life. Welcome to Dr. Durr's Living in the Sweet Spot, where practical tools and solutions from the intersection of mind-body medicine, science, and spiritual well-being awaken and empower you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Dr. Valen A. Durr, here in the sweet spot. Yes, you joined me today, and today I'm going to be talking with my guest about something that is been part of my own personal journey, but also something that I know that men and women struggle with. And many of you all have heard me talk about before how many years ago, when I reconnected to an old friend that I grew up with, Anthony Williams, and I lovingly call him Master Yoda. And he was instrumental in my learning and understanding about men, how they think and move in the world, and what matters to them, what's important to them. Because I personally, when it came to relationships, was just kind of tired of digging ditches and throwing myself in, as I like to call it. So I wanted to learn as much as I could in order to, one, understand menfolk, and two, of course, then really to kind of understand myself and my own journey, the choices I was making, what my blueprint was, although frankly, I didn't even know I had a blueprint, but yeah, learning to come to understanding that I had a blueprint and how that was driving my choices in terms of relationships. And so, today we're going to talk about how those men-women differences lead us to be so bad at marriage. So today, joining me is my guest, Mikkal Harris. Hey,
hello.
Welcome.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. And you know what? I am so glad to have the idea shifter, Mikkal Harris.
Yes, I'm honored to be here. Definitely honored to be here.
having this conversation. And here's the thing. I was watching your podcast called the Blue Room Podcast.
Okay.
And it was your show that 75 to 80% of women, right, initiate divorce. And happened to catch the reel where you were one of your guests, Deidre, was talking about the fact that why is it that menfolk can, accept critiques, was her word, from their manager. I need you to just talk a little louder. I need you to engage more with the customer, etc. But when it comes to the wife, then that's a problem for a man. And she said, and them saying that you're not my mother. And she's like, of course, no woman wants to hear that I'm not you're their mother. And you said profoundly, the only reason he calls you his mother is because you're a woman. Really, what it's saying is you're not my daddy. And I was like, whoa.
Yes.
And then you went on to say, which was the next whoop, which was that a man cannot learn from a woman what he should have learned from his daddy.
Yes.
I was like, whoop. Right.
Yes.
So I said, I have got to have Mikkal on here, my spiritual brother and professional colleague, for us to have this conversation so you can break this down, right? Unpack it, unwrap it, twist it, whatever we need to do to it. Right.
Yes.
So that the women and the men can get some understanding, right, about each other, and have some better relationships, right?
Correct.
Because when it comes to marriages, the statistics are pretty bad.
Horrendous.
But what I'm gonna do before we get into that aspect of the statistics, let me share with the audience, the unique wonderfulness and gifts and skill sets that you bring, to the conversation.
Okay.
And so, as I said, this is Mikkal Harris. He is an LCPC, which is a licensed clinical professional counselor, right? So it's another credentialing for a therapist. And he has 15 years of counseling experience in various settings, such as private practice, acute care, hospitals, and also youth residential programs. He is currently the director, he's currently the clinical division director and trauma trainer by profession. He facilitates, weekends to bring healing to men from past traumas. He is a dynamic public speaker, which y'all are about to experience, with a message of healing and freedom, and a relationship and interpersonal skills coach. He is the founder and host of the Blue Room podcast on YouTube, where he provides a space for men to heal and to be seen while challenging them and helping them grow in all areas that matter.
Yes.
Yes. So again, welcome my spiritual brother, professional colleague, the idea shifter, and let's start the conversation with that insightful commentary that you gave to Deirdre's to Deirdre's question.
Yeah, so what I was basically talking to her about was the podcast before that was a lot about masculinity and manhood and fatherlessness. And it just kind of went along with it, in that there are certain things that men should learn from their fathers when they're boys. And now when they become men, it's hard for them to hear it from a woman because they should have already learned it from their father, meaning that there are certain lessons that a boy should learn from his father. And it's not that they can't learn it from their wives or they can't learn it from their girlfriends. However, if it's a lesson that a boy should have learned from another man or their father, when they hear it coming from a mother, a marriage is set up as a partnership. It is not necessarily set up for teaching. I mean, if we wanted to be honest about it, it's hard for me to teach my wife something. It's hard for my wife to teach me something. It's not that we don't teach each other, but I think that the teaching in a marriage, some things are better caught than taught. So there are some things that I learned from my wife because I'm married to her. And I find out how she feels about things, and I willingly tweak some of the things that I do so that, the marriage can work. It's transactional, it's a relationship. But it's difficult for men to get in a marriage and learn how to be accountable to a woman. It'll be difficult for a woman to teach a man to be accountable, because a man should be taught to be accountable by his father. There are certain things a man should learn how to do from a father, and it's different when you hear it from a woman. And not only is it different from you when hearing it from a woman, but it's different when you hear it from your wife, because that's a different type of relationship. Even a man who, because she used an example of a man being at work, a man who is at work, right, that gets correction from a female boss is more likely to listen to the female boss, because that relationship gives her the authority. Like, she has the authority in that relationship. Okay. So it's easier for him to acquiesce or modify who he is or modify his behavior or do what she says, because that person is in authority. But when you get into a marriage, those lines of authority, especially for a man, they get blurred. So now he doesn't hear it as a partner. He hears it as someone trying to have authority over him. And since he should have learned that from a man, it's just hard for him to hear it from his wife. And I think in particular because it's his wife. And let's just be real, how society has been set up. it's a patriarchy society right now. I mean, that's how it always is. So men, even though they are raised by women, are still taught that they're supposed to be the man. They're still supposed to be the head of their house. So they go into this marriage with all these preconceived notions about their authority. And this may be the first time that this man has ever been challenged about the issue that this woman is bringing up. Like sometimes these relationships are like mirrors, and when a man starts to see himself in that relationship and a woman starts to correct him, sometimes it's just difficult for him to listen to that because it's something that his father should have laid a foundation for. And I found that to be particularly difficult for a lot of men. Even when I do marriage counseling, it seems to be an issue a lot of the time.
Okay, so you said a whole bunch there, and and so one of the things that you said that I wanted you to kind of, you know, again distinguish for me here is when you said some things are better caught than taught.
Yes.
What
Yes.
you mean by that one?
What I mean is sometimes when a person learns something experientially, it's not like when somebody tells them to correct it. Okay. So for instance, if I want to teach, I run these weekends for men. If I want to teach a man if I teach a man, I say, you know what, you're not always in control of your life. There'll be things that happen in your life that you're not in control. So I can tell a man, well, here's how things can happen in life so that you're not in control. And I can say, you know what, I can give a lot of examples, but if I put him in a situation where he doesn't have control, I don't have to teach him what not being in control feels like. He'll just know how it feels to not be in control because I put him in a position where he can't control stuff. Meaning that over the course of time, a lot of times we learn things experientially or we learn things by modeling behavior. A lot of the things I learned about being a man, I wasn't taught because my father wasn't there. So I got something from all the men that I know. I got something from this man over here. I got something from an uncle. I got something from a cousin. I got something from a boss. I got something from a mentor. They never really sat me down and told me how to do it, but I learned how to do it by modeling. So it's something that I caught in the light bulb. It went off. It was just a growth moment for me. And I think sometimes we're trying to teach other people, just like in the classroom, some kids, they learn better in small groups when they actually perform a task versus the ones who can just hear the teacher talk and learn. Kind of like that.
So, one of the things that I wondered about then was, what you were saying about I'm sorry, I did like I said, some of the things you talk about were just is so rich that I'm thinking about the obviously the caught versus taught part, and it's the thing that I think too of is also a number of years ago, I went to a memorial service, and this was a family I had known since my teens, and some of the boys were younger than me, and one of the one of the boys said that he his mom and his aunt had educational academic success, and that his I think his mom had a bachelor's degree, his aunt had a master's degree. He said, but the cousin that had transitioned, that we're having the memorial service for, he said it wasn't until he saw him go to college that he believed that he could. And it was in that moment that I really got that that what it means in terms of modeling, the significance of that, which is that as a boy, I identify with men, as a woman. And obviously we know, how do you learn how to be a woman or a mother is from other women. How do you learn how to be a man? or father is from other men.
Yeah.
And so, but it was that moment when it really crystallized for me that that if someone, if they don't see themselves in the person that they're having to learn from,
Yes.
then they can't learn from them.
Yeah.
And what he was saying is even though I have a couple females in the family that have academic success, because I don't see myself in them, then I can't believe that I can do what they did. And so I think does that kind of speak to what it is you were talking about?
Yes, yeah, and yeah, I think the issue, and that is the issue, that you have to see. A boy has to see a man performing that stuff, because part of experiential learning is seeing that it actually works. So, like, if you see somebody do something and they get results, you're more likely to perform that behavior, because it's somebody you respect, you see yourself in them, and you get results. But the issue that was compounded when Deidre made that comment is that since most men are not in the home, since the fathers are not in the home, they don't have anybody to learn it from. So the first time when someone, I also said in there something about, the first time I learned that I had to be accountable to someone was when I married you. The first time I realized I couldn't manage money was when I married you. The first time I realized I didn't talk politely to a woman was when I married you, because I didn't have any interaction to see a relationship about how that dynamic worked. Like, I never witnessed it from my father. So when a woman sits me down and they say, well, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, it almost feels juvenile. Like, even if she doesn't make it seem juvenile, as a man, something inside of me knows that these are lessons that I should have already learned. So now there's a shame that goes along with it as a man. Now, yes, it's the pride of a man, I'll admit that. But sometimes there can be a shame when you have to be taught by somebody that you're supposed to protect, somebody that you're supposed to care for. So you know how it goes when you get married. You're supposed to be the head of your house. You're supposed to love and protect. You're supposed to be provider. Well, when I'm in that position, the person I'm covering, it's hard for me to learn that, because I should have learned it from my father, pretty much.
Right. So here's the other thing too that I learned from um my play dad, who I lovingly call Pops, Dr. Reginald
Okay.
Jones. And I have at that point he was a young son. And so
Mm-hmm.
of course he was talking to me about how, and he used much more colorful language, which I'm not going to use, which I'm going to use here. But he was saying how when boys reach a certain age, they're not trying to hear anything that their mother said, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, one of the other again, Master Yoda, again, he used some more colorful language to
Right.
describe about when that testosterone kicks in. Again, they're not trying to listen. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, again, I connect this to not only what you were saying about the father not being in the home and them not learning from the father. I also connected to that. And one of the other things too that I came to understand in terms of the languaging or the understanding of it for me was, I remember seeing this episode where they noticed that on safari, the elephants were attacking the cars more, and they didn't know or understand why. And so in terms of trying to figure it out, what they discovered was the poachers had killed off so many of the adult bull male elephants
Yes,
that
I've heard
now
that.
they're not present to
Yeah.
keep the adolescent males in check. And so what was happening was they were attacking more cars, one, becoming more aggressive, and two, they were also becoming sexually active much earlier, because in the normal order of things, it's the adult male elephants that get access to the females, not the adolescent males. But
Right.
their absence means they're not keeping them in check in
Right.
both of those areas. So like adolescent boys do, they just running wild.
Yep, that's
Boys
right.
gone wild.
Yes.
so,
Yes. Yes.
so So I'm raising that question to say, is that to me, is that also kind of the origin of it? As boys mature, as males mature, they reach that age, of course, where hormones are kicking in, and there's just kind of seemingly natural tendency not to respond to a female whose approach, in my experience, typically is softer,
Yeah,
than a man's. Number one, in my experience, y'all only gonna do so much talking, and that's the other thing I learned when men say women talk too much. It's not it to me. It's not always about the amount that we're talking. It's also that we wait too long before we take action. In
okay,
my experience, a lot of men, they say something one or two times in terms of their kids, and then they getting checked.
right.
So I'm just wondering what do you think about that in terms of, again, the issue about maturation and hormones, and how that plays into they're not wanting to listen to a woman now that they're a mature male, because it was already happening when they were a young man.
Right. Ironically, I'm very familiar with that. We use actually the weekends I facilitate, we use that study on the weekend.
Do you
Ironically,
really?
about the bull elephants, yes, we do. And I think it's one thing that in
Well, I
society,
didn't say I went. I just want you to know, I called you my spiritual brother and professional colleague for a reason.
yes, and I'm very familiar with that study. And so the weekends I actually run, they're for healing and they're to help men get over trauma, but it's actually an initiation weekend. Because when those bull elephants, it's an initiation to manhood. Because when those bull elephants, those male bull elephants, the fathers were removed from the community. Now they have to figure out how to be men. They have to figure out what the rules of engagement are. So they're kind of forced to do man things, but they're actually still boys. So if those elephants were in that village, they would see what these elephants do. They would see what the elephants do. And then when the little bull elephant steps out of line, that big elephant is going to go, no, 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 no. That's not what men do. This is what we do right here. And just biologically, when you study initiation in men and women, they were very rarely initiated only because they had menstruation. So that's kind of like it automatically ushers them into womanhood. So the women, you would wrap their arms around them and show them women things, right? But with men, there's no biological clock. I mean, obviously there's one ticking, but there's not one where you know what? Today I became a man. Today I became a man. Today I learned this. This is the reason why you had bar mitzvahs and you had the rites of passages in a lot of these places. So if a man goes through those stages properly, he learns how to be a man by being welcomed by a community of men. So in Aborigine tribes, even in European third world countries, and especially in Africa, you had these rites of passages because men had to be taught how to be men by other men. And they were brought into a community of men. So once you're brought into that community of men, you know how to be accountable. You've been tested, you've been challenged, and the
Mm-hmm.
lines and the boundaries are drawn for you appropriately about how you're supposed to navigate and how you interact with your world. So if we put that in terms of a marriage, right? When you put that in the terms of a marriage, a lot of the men who get married in today's society, I'll say from my generation, we have poor conflict resolution skills. We have poor interpersonal communication skills. There are certain things we did not learn. So we're already going into these marriages with deficits. So women are actually forced to teach men things that they should have learned from their fathers. You're a psychiatrist, there's certain points in a human being's life where they're more likely to learn things in certain stages than they are if they pass that age of development. And that's the thing that we're trying to teach men boy stuff. So now when she married the man, he's a boy. And if he doesn't grow up and he doesn't find some way to take care of that little boy, if I don't find a man to teach this little boy, or I don't go to therapy to teach this little boy, or I don't get books to teach this little boy, then the wife is forced to raise a man, but he's actually a boy. And it just creates this tension where it's too much on this woman's shoulders because she didn't anticipate she married a boy. She thought she married a man. That's really the best way that I can put
Amen.
it. We don't have the skills. People think that they're men, but they're really not men. That we're
and
really not men when we get married.
and the reason here's the thing with the reason I said amen is because frankly, I think that as a woman, I don't even understand those things that you just talked about, especially when you're talking about that a woman raising a man. And of course, it's too much, but you don't necessarily know why it's too much.
Right.
And, one of the things that, I'm a huge advocate of is the fact that, I've developed because, I'm a single parent, been divorced for a number of years. Is that to me, it was really important to develop, I call it the men folk in the village,
Right.
to help fill in, because because my ex-husband lives in a different state. And
Okay.
so without that regular presence there, as you said, to be a teacher, to be a demonstration of manhood. So then it becomes again, I think that, and to be clear about this, a woman can teach anyone what it is to be human. I can teach you to have honor and integrity and encourage and to do those things that I think and that are common to humanity. But again, as a boy, if you don't see yourself in me, then again, you're not necessarily learning from me. And so, one of the difficulties is that then I'm struggling trying to teach or deal with something, and I don't even understand that really the problem, because nobody's explained it to me. If some of the men folk in the village haven't, that really the problem is that I'm trying to teach something to somebody that they should have learned that they didn't, and that they don't want to learn from me as a woman. They don't want to learn from me, as their wife. So, I think you brilliantly laid that out. And, I think that, one of the things that, one of the things that's important to, why that is important is frankly, the marital statistics, right? The divorce rate has been going down, but it's still higher than it was in the 70s, right? I mean,
Definitely.
it's in 2021, they're talking about, almost 700,000 divorces, 689,308 divorces. And I guess we would make it 309 if we included Reba.
You remember that? Yes.
So
Yeah.
include your guest who's coming.
That was fun.
So and those statistics were in across like 45 states in the US that were reporting it. And then, as you talked about, depending upon who did the study, then you got, say almost 70% to 80% of the divorces are being initiated, by women.
By women,
Right. The American Psychological Association, they're saying 40 to 50% of first marriages end in divorce. And then it's 60 to 67% of marriages, of second marriages that end in divorce. And then the divorce rate for third marriages or higher is 73%.
Right. You might as well not even do it. Give it up.
Yeah, because you ain't doing it right.
Right. Yeah. Something wrong. Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I thought, that those were, so this is to me, a really important conversation, to have, because I think a lot of people, frankly, if we was just to tell the truth, I think a lot of us, we don't really know what we're doing. when it
Mm.
comes to marriage. And I
Yep.
think that we don't understand that a lot of that has to do with the man-woman differences. I think that it has a lot to do, like I said, with we're getting a blueprint from our families, and we don't even understand it's a blueprint. So we don't understand that we're rebuilding the same structure. And so some people, guys, like I say, some people get a blueprint maybe for a 3-bedroom house. Some people get a blueprint for a house that maybe 4,000 square feet. But some people get a blueprint for an outhouse.
Right.
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 So we get a blueprint for an outhouse. And I think the average person prefers to have indoor plumbing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So learning and understanding that, I got a blueprint. Is this blueprint working for me? Do I want to make, additions? Do I just want to tear that sucker down and start over, right? And I
Right.
think that it's important to understand that, and I heard, Rob Bell, who actually is a pastor a number of years ago, say, no relationship can be healthier than the most unhealthy person in the relationship,
Yeah.
right? And because it's like being in the 2-man race, the 3-legged race. You tied together where you can't go faster than the slowest person is really what that
That's
means.
right. Yeah.
So you can't have a healthier relationship than the most unhealthy person in the relationship. And something that you mentioned, which is actually a chapter in my book, Heaven Abounds in You, is the chapter on relationships. And where I say relationships are mirrors, and many people don't understand what that means. And so I explain to them simply what that means is the person that you picked is based upon your values and standards. So they're a mirror of you. They're a mirror of your values, your standards. You picked them, but they're also showing up as an opportunity for you to heal some of those wounds. You basically like a movie director.
Yeah.
And I say people, when they show up to audition, you get to say you got the role, or you get to say, thank you for coming. We'll be in touch. Right. So
Right.
they in your movie because you cast them in that role. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing that people don't necessarily understand about how it is that they're creating these relationships, or in marriages that are really reflective of their thoughts and their beliefs and their intentions. Again, as I said, and their opportunities to grow, to develop, to mature, to heal, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny you use movies, right? Because there's certain things called previews, right? So the thing about a movie preview is that, man, I'm telling you, have you ever watched a movie and every single action scene in the movie was in the preview? So when you actually watch the movie, you go, you know what? I thought it was more action than this. I mean, because in the movie preview, they geek you up for the movie. Like you're really, oh my God, this is going to be the greatest movie in the world, greatest movie in the world. And then when you go see the movie, you're like, this movie is not what I thought it was going to be. And I just believe that relationships work the same way, because people have a definition of what marriage is, and then there's what marriage is. And these expectations, sometimes we have expectations as human beings, and we just have expectations, but we really don't know what's required to actually fulfill those expectations. So like you can have an idea of what a marriage or a relationship is going to be like, but you do not know what it takes to create and fulfill that expectation. And the thing about marriage is deceptively, and it's just how life is designed. At the beginning of something that's based on love and happiness, better or for worse, most people anticipate the better. Like they don't plan for the worst. I always say, what do I say? You hope for the best, but plan for the worst. That's kind of how I live my life. That's why insurance exists. But the expectations that a person has, going back to your point, they don't know what their expectations are rooted in. So they don't know the motivation behind their expectation. They don't know the root of their expectation. They don't know the anchor of that expectation, nor do they know the part they play in the expectation actually coming to pass. They don't know, and most of us don't know, men and women alike, they're trying to write the story of their marriage. But we don't have the power to write that book. That book kind of writes itself based on the interaction between the two people. So a lot of these marriages fail is simply because of expectations. It's simply because the movie did not match the preview. Like this preview was, yeah.
Or as I would say, the sizzle reel was a fizzle reel.
Yes. It's like you just, and I think marriage is one of those things that, like, do you ride roller coasters at all?
I do.
Right.
I do.
Most roller coasters, when you ride them, look scarier than they are when you actually get on them. So, like, when you look at them, people who don't ride roller coasters, they imagine it to be something that is not. But when you actually ride that roller coaster, it's like, you know what? This ride was pretty cool. But what happens in relationships is that, you can't see the track. You can't anticipate any and everything. And I believe that when people have expectations, they're comparing what their marriage is to what they thought it was going to be. Let me give you one example. This is going to make it so plain. When I first decided I wanted to marry my wife, bless her soul, I love my wife, great mother. You know what?
And you all have been married for 15 years.
15 years, but this is my second marriage.
Right.
So my first sizzle reel was a fizzle reel, right? So it was this other man that my wife, she didn't use the word love, but she really liked this guy, right? And she had really liked this guy from afar for a very long time. And she had not been in a lot of relationships with men. She was very inexperienced, but she really liked this man. So when I came to try to be with her, I just flat out said, you know what, Trina? I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Whatever. You know how that conversation, I don't need to get into specifics. And she looked me in my eye. This is a true story. And she said, but I always wanted him. I love him. And she pointed to the guy she's never been with, even though she had been having interactions with me and we had gotten to know each other. What that taught me was people are in love with their fantasy. They're not in touch with their reality, meaning that there's this thing that you imagine to be that just does not exist at all. She had not had a conversation with the guy. She didn't even know if the guy actually knew whether she liked him or not. But the fantasy she had came up with in her mind about how that relationship would be, what it would look like, how this and this. And I believe we do that with marriage. I believe that we fantasize about what marriage is, but then there's a certain thing that it actually is. And it's like that theory doesn't match the practice. So
right. And
people get lost in that.
Right. So, and I think so two things happen, and I'm going to kind of jump to the end and then come back, which is one of the reasons why when people divorce, really what they're grieving is the loss of the fantasy. Because if the marriage was the reality, you wouldn't be getting divorced.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. You're right.
Yes, you're right. They're really grieving the loss of the fantasy. Now, how do you get there? To your point, is because we don't sit down and have a conversation about what my fantasy is versus your fantasy.
That's right.
We don't have a conversation to say, this is what I'm thinking. This is what I imagine. This is what I want to achieve, what I want to accomplish. And I'll tell you when it got crystallized for me, actually. Mm-hmm. I saw the interview of Melinda Gates actually with Oprah, and
Okay.
he was talking about at this point it was talking about the courtship with her and Bill, and they went away for the weekend. He proposes, and she was talking about them walking down the beach together, discussing their ideas for philanthropy.
Mm,
And
okay.
I could see the imagery of that. And I actually connected it to something that God said to me many years ago,
Okay.
which was I was asking about the relationship I was in at the time. And I said, okay, I said, I need a sign. A couple weeks go by and I still not see nothing. And I was like, okay, God, I need a sign. You know me, I'm blind. I needed the big bold neon letters.
Yeah.
Then I still don't see nothing. I'm sitting there. And then one day I hear him go, God says to me, what are you doing? I was like, huh? He said, what
Right.
are you doing? You don't want the same things. You're not going the same place. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Right. And then shortly thereafter, I left. But what I didn't understand at that point was that was the standard that I should be applying to every relationship. Do we
Mm,
want the
okay.
same things? Are we going the same place? Subsequently, I think in like 2014, there was um, an author and a poet, and he said, and I'm gonna have to pull this up, but he said, life has taught us that love does not consist of gazing at each other, but of looking together in the same direction.
Ooh, that's deep.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Is Antoine de Saint? Okay, yeah, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry is
Okay.
who he is. He's a French author, and
Okay.
and and so I put those two together, and I was like, okay, I got it right.
Okay.
Do you want the same things? Or you go in the same place? And then with what Melinda Gates said, again, it gave me an image of that, which was I could literally see her and Bill walking down the beach together, and they're talking about their ideas of philanthropy. So again, how are you going to how in terms of a marriage, how are you going to get there together if you don't have the same destination and if you're not going together relatively at the same pace? So
Right.
that's how her saying that to me kind of for me helped crystallize that. Do we want
Okay.
the same thing and are we going the same place? Because if not, what are we doing?
Right. Uh, So I do think people err because of this also. So I got married when I was 25. So now I'm 48. So I imagine myself being in a different place than I imagined when I was 25.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's fundamentally the issue that some people have, that they don't really possess the ability to change. Because over the course of time, you know, people grow, people change jobs, people change, they change what they want, they change what they want as men, they change what they want as women. And I think what we have a hard time doing is being in a relationship and letting people change and evolve into what they are and still being able to make it work. So, for instance, go back to the movie analogy. It's just in my head, right? So, if you have a movie that you're about to pull off and you want that movie to work, you got to have a script, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The issue with life is there's no script. See, that's the issue with life, that life is improv. you know, there's really no script. So when you want to produce this great movie, life presents challenges. It has so many different variables. I mean, you're a psychiatrist, so I imagine you know this about the brain, the body, and life. There's so many variables that life throws at you that sometimes the plan you had is not the plan you keep, or the destination you were headed to, you kind of modify that destination. And I believe some people don't possess the ability to improvise. Like, they don't possess the ability to be flexible. And sometimes there's certain things in marriage that you wanted to have. You wanted it to go this way, but now it's going a different way. And sometimes when we say people grow in different directions, there's there's a scripture in the Bible said that two can't walk together except they be in an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people use that scripture as an excuse to get divorced. You know what I mean? You couldn't find a more north and south couple than me and my wife. We have absolutely nothing in common. I'm a wild child. She's super conservative. I love hip hop. She really can't stand it. She likes shrimp. I don't eat seafood. Like we don't really have a lot of things in common. But what it has taught me is that when we say we're going to be with somebody, I realize that love is a decision. I'm talking about barring any type of abuse or anything. Love is a decision. It's my decision. I believe that she can go accomplish her goal and I can go accomplish mine, but our anchor is the marriage. I kind of feel that way. And people have issues sometimes with, my wife. I remember when my first wife, she actually left me because I was a pastor. And she said, you know what, Mikkal, you are a wonderful man, but you used to be popular. You were wild. You were the life of the party. You're not that guy anymore. I don't want to be a pastor's wife. Mm-hmm. She made it really plain, meaning that now, mind you, she knew I was all these things when we got married, but she didn't anticipate that would happen. And when that happened, she was like, you know what? I'm gone. And I'm not even mad at her about it. I mean, it's a decision she needed to make. So I think that some people, going back to what you said, some people have a fantasy in their mind. Mm-hmm. And when that marriage doesn't line up with that fantasy, they're going to get another script because they're trying to write it instead of live it.
Right. So here's the thing too that I'll say that I disagree with you about.
Okay.
You and your wife could not remain married for 15 years if you all are not the same, like-minded about those fundamentals that matter.
No, fundamentals.
But what I'm saying is,
I agree with that.
When one likes shrimp and one doesn't like seafood, that's not a fundamental issue, right? That's what I mean. What I'm saying, those kinds of things I think are less important than are we fundamentally like-minded? And also, where it says when God puts together, who God puts together, let no man put asunder. The problem is most marriages, God didn't put them together. They put themselves together. So then that doesn't quite hold because, again, he didn't put
or they let a man put it aside.
I'm just saying.
No, I feel you.
Put them together. So and so it's okay to asunder it because it wasn't it's together in the first place.
It wasn't God, no way, huh?
Right. It wasn't God. It wasn't God in it anyway. So, and the other thing too, to your point is I try to continue, I tell people, love is love, but relationship is entirely different, meaning I can love you, but not be in relationship with you.
I agree with that.
I can love you and the relationship not work because the relationship requires behavior.
Yep.
Right.
It sure does.
It doesn't require love, but it does require behavior. Do we do the things that honor each other and that enable for a relationship to work between us? I also say to people that, a relationship is a negotiation. It is an ongoing negotiation.
Yes, it is.
And when the negotiations stop, the relationship stops. And some people take exception to that because they think it's very business transactional oriented. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's not that, but I'm saying even if it's something as simple as what movie we gonna go see, that's a negotiation. Yeah. It's just how long does negotiation take? Where are we gonna live? How many kids we gonna have? Are we gonna have any? How we raise them? All of that stuff, all of that stuff is a negotiation. So do we have the ability to talk to each other and say, this is what I want, this is what I don't want? And it takes courage. Am I willing to tell you the truth about who I am and what I want? Are you willing to tell me your truth about who you are and what you want?
Yeah.
And again, to your point, the growth can be occurring at different rates, but are we able to bridge whatever the differences are enough to be able to maintain the relationship? Or does what happen is the separation and the distance gets so great that the bridge collapses?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. Like the you know, and the belief that, like I said, I do keep going back to fantasy because I actually got with my wife because I thought that she possessed the ability to struggle. I really did. Man, I looked at how she lived and I looked at who she was.
So then now the folks are not misinterpreting that. What do you mean by that?
I mean, struggle, somebody who understands that sometimes, and for better or for worse, things are going to be worse. Because I believe that, like, when we get married, we're so, like, I didn't get married for love. I really did get married for purpose. Like, I think I knew exactly why this was supposed to be my wife. She's not the type of woman I dated. She's not the type of woman that I had ever been with. From physically all the way to how she thought, I had never been with a woman like that. I had a type, and I knew that my type was no longer good. So I didn't marry a type. I actually married something real, at least in my own mind. And when I say the ability to struggle, somebody that will be able to adjust with the ebbs and flows of life. Because some people just by nature possess the ability to struggle and suffer more than other individuals. Like, some people get cancer and they get angry about having cancer and they die spitefully and they're mad at the world. But I had a good friend who passed a couple of years ago. And in the last 2 weeks of her life, we went to a party. We threw a last party for her. Her name was Renee. And she sat me down and she put both of her hands in my hands and she said, Mikkal, I thank God for this sickness because it's brought me closer to everybody else in my life. I realized that me trying to have my career and chase money and do all of this stuff, I overlooked so many little things that I should be appreciating in life. I'm telling people I love them. I'm embracing people. And I really have found God. I found myself and I found true intimacy with other human beings. And she cried and hugged me. That type of person right there, you know, there are some people who live life like she lived it after she got cancer. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean. Like, some people who would appreciate that and be able to go up and down with the ebbs and flows of life. You said it, negotiation. Like, when stuff happens, you know, sometimes it's not even negotiating with your spouse, it's negotiating with life, because life is making determinations that causes you to renegotiate your own contract, even with yourself. So you have these contracts that you have with the person you're with, and it's these contracts you're doing with life where you have to adjust, you have to be flexible. But I do like what you said about the negotiation piece, because I honestly, people ask me, did I love my wife when I got married? And I tell people no. But the way I feel about her is I had made a decision that I was committed, and the love grew. Like, people look strangely at countries where they have arranged marriages. Mm-hmm. Those people know that when they get in these marriages, they're making a commitment to grow something that is going to be different on the last day than it is the first day. And I think it's something in, making that decision, choosing to do that difficult work, to do the work where you got to roll your sleeves up, and the stuff you don't want to do, like you said, those intimate conversations, that telling you what I want, and being bold enough to take a stand for yourself in a relationship and still negotiate is key. I really like that point that you made. I really like that.
Thank you. And I've come, you and I have also talked about this too, again, that part of the difficulty, whether you enter into any relationship, including marriage, is seeking happiness. And the fact of the matter is, the other person can't make you happy. What I tell people is this: can I make you be an astronaut? No, then I can't make you happy. I can't.
You are right. You're right.
Right. I can't make you angry. I can't make you I can't make you anything. I can't make you feel anything.
That's
And
true.
so when it's an automatic setup, because nobody's going to be everything that you want all the time when you want it to be that way. Just like the weather
Yes.
isn't. If I need the weather to be a certain way all the time, I'm going to be unhappy a lot of days. And so
Yes.
the point is, I need to discover that I get to choose happiness for myself. And each and every moment, each and every day, irrespective of other people's behaviors or the circumstances.
That's right.
So you shouldn't enter into marriage to be happy. And that's another part of what we were talking about. So when you're picking a partner, I'm not saying that you don't want to be happy. I'm not saying that you can't love the person, but understand that they should not be your source. And you and I, of course,
That's
as
right.
two spiritual beings, we know that anytime you make something or someone else the source of your goodness, your
It's
wonderfulness, your
over.
happiness, your joy, that's called a false idol.
Yes, it is.
That's called idol worshiping. So,
Yes.
right. And so
Yeah.
nobody and nothing else can be the source of our happiness except the source within us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it's important to look at marriage and relationship. Is this a good fit? Right.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
wear a size 11 shoe and I try on lots of shoes and boots. Why? Because every 11 is not a good fit.
Not the same.
Not
Say
It's
that.
not a good fit. And there's nothing necessarily wrong with the shoe. There's nothing necessarily wrong with my foot. It just ain't a good fit.
That's right.
Now, that being said, let me try to take my size 11 foot and try to shove it in a 9. That sucker's gonna hurt because it ain't
You
a
ain't
good
lying.
fit.
You ain't lying.
It ain't a good fit.
Yeah.
Right. So, I would say, as then we get into this wrapping this up. What are some solutions that you think benefit I think both parties, women in terms of them understanding and identifying the differences, for men understanding and identifying the difference, and how do we bridge those gaps?
Well, I think the first thing, going to your shoe analogy,
Mm-hmm.
you're able to pick the right shoe because you know your size. And I believe that men and women both, sometimes we lack the self-awareness to know what we should be with. Like, like we don't know enough about ourselves to know. So if you already wear a size 11, you're not putting your foot in a 2. Like you just already know, you know what? And I've heard women say this, there's some truth in it. Some people are out of your league. Some people you have no business being with. There are some people that you just should not be with. And I think that if we learn more about ourselves before we make commitments and before we get married, then we would know the questions to ask and the things to look for when we
Yes.
actually chose somebody to be with. So you got to know your size, because truly one size does not fit all in relationships.
No.
That would be one solution. Know yourself.
Right. And so I think, again, to reiterate, I think that it's important for men to have a village of women folk to learn about women. And I think it's important for women to have a village of men folk to learn about men.
Yeah.
There's one of my dear teachers and mentors. He says of me that my thinking is a hybrid thinking. He says it's not quite
Okay.
male, it's not quite female, and that's because I've spent a lot of years learning from men and understanding, and so my thinking is more hybrid. So I think that's important. That if you want to learn about men, learn about them from men. If you want to learn about women, learn about them from women. Right.
Yep.
And then something else you said, and it just was also knowing about who you are and then what's a good fit.
Yeah.
And then you got to be real clear about what's in the benefit package. you say
You're exactly right. You're right. You're right. You're right. You're right.
you said that. I was like, you gotta be.
I remember that.
You remember that. So yeah.
Yeah. That
So
benefits package. Yeah. Yep.
right. So
You're right.
I think that, again, what we're talking about is being clear about who you are, what you want, what's a
Yeah.
good fit, being willing to communicate those things. And I
Yes.
think that also in terms of I should be able to say to you what I want from you. I should be able to make requests from you and not be kind of vilified or made the problem that I'm making a request from you.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? And we negotiate that. I think, and you and I both do therapy with people that a lot of folks are children or adolescents in mind and emotion in adult bodies, and they need the assistance from a therapist with the tools and skills to help them heal their childhood wounds. And so I think it's important that people do individual therapy and family therapy. We talked about the communications, and the other thing too that you said I want to make sure is people need to be accountable, right?
Yeah.
You talked about that.
Yeah.
Not only accountable for me and my needs and my wants, but I'm accountable to the unit to the family unit and to the community. And I use a mobile, like the mobile hanging over the baby's bed. Because when something I learned from John Bradshaw many years ago, when you touch one part of the mobile, it sets the whole thing in motion. Why? Because it's all connected. So what I do impacts you, and what you do impacts me. And so we need to be accountable to each other and how we're affecting each other. So, I just so want to thank you, of course, for coming on and just having this marvelous conversation with me. And I'm sure we're going to pick this up again.
We will.
And I, you know what, I want you all to check out
the Blue Room.
Tellers, the Blue Podcast Room, right? The
Blue
idea
Room
shifter. The idea shifter, right?
Yep. Don't worry, I'm going to invite you to the Blue Room. You can come in whenever you want. I'm glad. I was honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, and thank you for the invitation. And so, folks, they can find you where in terms of social media and what other platforms?
It's right here at Move Your Life, MOVEYOURLF on YouTube. That's where I am. And then on Instagram, it's just my name, Mikkal Harris. Facebook, Mikkal Harris, MIKKALHARRIS. That's it. And you'll see some content that can be edgy at times, but I'm really trying to improve men and challenge men so we can get in these marriages and actually do what we need to do.
You know what? I just think you just keep it real, right? You keeping it real, you making it real, you making it understandable. And some of it is definitely is thought-provoking, it's engaging, some of it is mind-blowing, it's gonna pull you up, it's gonna lift you up. It's food for thought, and it's food for your soul.
Yep.
So
well, thank you. I had a good time.
Absolutely. And same here. Just wonderful conversation. And so, so with that food for thought and food for your soul, I am your host, Dr. Balin A. Durr, awakening and empowering you to live out your infinite potential, to live life in the sweet spot. Thank you for joining us today in the sweet spot. Share, follow, and like us on social media. To learn more, please visit balinadurmd.com, spelled BALINADURRMD.com. Join us next week, and remember, when you heal your mind, all things are possible.